So this panel is the what. What are the practical implications and situations? And this is all about focusing our energy on what we want in the world rather than what we don't want. So, as I was saying previously, the universe doesn't know the difference between want and don't want, and whatever we focus all of our collective energies on is what we can co-create. And so this, for me, is all about making sure that we're focusing on what we want to make in terms of change in the world. So, Limor, I've already introduced you once. Would you like me to do it again?
I might have some, just in short.
Yeah, just in short. Okay, so Limor Schafman is the Director and Strategy and Operations at LG Nova Centre and supporting the Nova teams across the challenge and ecosystem development with strategic partnerships, corporate development and funding initiatives. Yeah, thank you, Limor.
Thank you so much, Tiffany and Tiff, and thank you everyone, particularly for those of you who've stayed for this next group. And I want to, before we introduce the panelists and have them introduce themselves, I want to actually do something that I don't often get to do because I had the good fortune of I'm so glad you're excited, moderating a fireside chat at CES this year. And you know, as you're sitting in that room and you have several hundred people in front of you and you're like, you know what, I would really like to do an Om chant to start things off and get everyone kind of connected. One day I look forward to doing that at CES and not be thought like, oh my God, who the hell is she? So we're gonna set the premise right now together, if you don't mind. So if you could do 3 Oms together. So yes, sit up, and if you don't mind putting both your feet on the ground and just sort of sit up, great. And you can do it at your own breath, but I'm just gonna lead it and then you can do whatever you want. And we'll do it 3 times. So we're gonna inhale and then just call it out. Today we're going to be talking a continuation of talking about the feminine energy, bringing in the feminine divine, and really now, this time, in terms of the what, looking at how we are bringing it into our styles of leadership, and how do we manifest it as we create the what. And we just heard that the what is often about the yang, right? It's that male energy that kicks in. I contest that actually there's a whole new dynamic that's happening, and the active energy is also in the feminine. It's not just about the intuition, but the issue with intuition is also about creative energy, and that is highly feminine. We are creative entities, and we're really becoming into that energy in a strong way now, whatever the gender is that you want to identify with, frankly. One of the things also that I found really interesting this week, and I want to talk about also the reignition of the feminine, because the feminine existed, yeah. It was just quashed for a very long time. And I really had the good fortune, I was in Zurich this weekend, and I went by the Benedictine convent, the Fraumeister, Munster, I think Fraumeister? And the fascinating history. I don't know, I've seen nods of here, so you know the history. I did not. That for a period of time, particularly from the 13th century, there was a very powerful church. They were allowed to mint coin from the 11th century. From the 13th century to the time of the Reformation in 1524, it was a convent, and the abbess was in fact the ruler of Zurich. And she was able to, actually she was called the imperial princess. And so I love the fact that a monetary, economic stronghold of Zurich, the city, was actually led by a woman for over 300 years. I think that's really, really powerful. And so we're going to use that as a way of bringing forth our conversation. And in this conversation today, we have 3 very special people. So we have, in order of, whatever order, okay.
I don't know place.
No. So we start from the middle, right there. The middle, actually, so Navroop Sahdev, She is CEO and founder of Digital Economist, the Digital Economist, and Vera Futorjanski. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm used to all kind of pronunciations, so it's
Futorjanski, no?
Futorjanski.
Futorjanski, I apologize. CEO and founder of Veritas Ventures, and Royston Flude, president of CSPOC. So thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming them. So by way of introducing yourselves to the audience, I would love you to, let's use some of the language we can use here, tap into your feminine and share with us how your feminine energy, how you feel it, and also how you use it in your own lives, how it manifests itself in your own lives, in your business leadership, and in your, just from a global, a general leadership perspective. How does that show? And so Navroop, why don't we start with you?
Sure, yeah. Thank you. Wow, I never imagined I will be sitting on a panel talking about like super like intimate stuff, but here we are, and I feel good about it. Yeah, and I think this is a revolution that has been long due. I do want to start out by saying that this is a sort of a little bit of a Western conception that the feminine is like taking care and that sort of stuff, and the masculine is sort of going out in the world. I'm from India, and the feminine is a dynamic energy that makes things happen, right? Many of you probably know about Shiva and Shakti, and Shiva is the raw sort of energy of creation, and this is just a way to label, you know, I guess energy generally speaking. It's not about, oh, there's this male god sitting above the clouds called Shiva. That's not kind of, it's not as material. And then like without Shakti, the dynamic energy that keeps things alive, that, you know, ensures the cycles of life and birth, nothing moves in the universe. And so there are many stories like that. So I think first of all, I want to challenge, and I want to, you know, get the facts straight on that it's in fact the feminine energy, right, that makes things happen. So, and you know, for me, it's a long journey, right? And I just want to give a shout out to Tiffany, who included me in the wild launch, and she's one of the goddesses that you can meet on the planet. And you know, one of the book recommendations in that group was Women Who Run with the Wolves. Right, and it was, I think, a New York Times bestseller for a number of years. And if you read that book, first of all, it's life-changing. And Clarissa Estes is still alive. She lives in Colorado. She's in her 70s now. For me, that is a complete guide that a female and a male needs to successfully operate and tap into higher consciousness, you know, and it's not like foo-foo out there, but really sort of tapping into your full instincts and growing and becoming, creating from that, right? And I'm going to let you read the book, but again, highly recommend. The second part of the question, how do you bring that energy into building things, creating things, manifesting things? Again, I think one of the biggest things that you could do as a female, I could speak as a female, I think we're gifted, we are complete in ourselves because we create life, and hello, you know, so is really to recognize that you know, the overculture is not end all and be all, right? And for me, when that realization dawned upon me that I actually have everything that I need internally in my inner universe as well as externally, that was a shift in consciousness, you know, and nothing less than that. And ever since, it's been an amazing journey. And for me, out in the world, it's play. The real true journey is inside. And you know, I've read about it, and I grew up with sort of things like that growing up in India, but I always, you know, I have 3 master's degree, I'm a trained economist, so like the whole thing, so I was like not sort of tapping into it. But I'd say one last thing and give it the mic to the other panelists here. I moved to Hawaii 2 years ago, in the pandemic, and I spent 2 years there. Just moved to New York City last weekend. So I like to think of this as a cycle, a completion of a cycle. But when I started on Nikula, it really actually helped me tap into my own childhood and the wisdom that I inherited. And I thought, wow, I have access to 5,000 years of wisdom, and so do all of us, right? If we only pay attention and if we look out for it. And so that for me has been an amazing deepening of myself with a capital S, and really the world around me. And I just say this, I think as a female, and as you kind of, I guess become wiser, doesn't matter the gender, you could just see reality better. You see through much more layers of reality. You see the texture of reality a lot better. You see people, you see a lot more than you would have initially seen, right? And these are, again, hard to sort of explain things, or I guess on a panel discussion, but just trying here. And I'd love to chat more with anyone who's looking to, learn more.
Vera?
Thank you. I love what you share. It's beautiful. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Tiffany. We're connected via a mutual friend who's also very tapped into both of his energies. And I think it's beautiful to see that something like a house of balance is actually taking place in Davos, and also the psychedelic house. So it's very different this year. It's really wonderful to see how we are becoming more aware and kind of conscious. Okay. So where do I start even? I'd like to give an example that happened to me a few years ago. So I come from a tech background. I've been in tech for the last 10 years. And I remember I gave a talk once, and I came off the panel, and a young woman came to me and she said, "Thank you so much." And I said, "Well, the talk wasn't even that great. I mean, what are you thanking for?" And she's like, "Thanks to you, I'm in the tech industry, because once I came to you to listen to something you were talking about 3 years ago, and you were wearing a skirt on stage." And she said, "For me, this made such a difference. I realized I can be in the technology field and I can still look feminine." So she was so grateful, and was an Egyptian woman, and she's like, I've been living in Dubai for the last 8 years. So so she was really thankful. It was wonderful. Also, I think because I've been in Dubai for the last 8 years, women are much more feminine there as well. I grew up in Germany, but being in Dubai, it's a lot about femininity. You wear a lot of kind of long dresses, and you dress more elegantly. So it's you don't try to be in a suit in order to kind of show power. And I think this is region specific as well, but I feel like it's changing in the world. When I go to Germany now, I feel it's becoming more feminine as well, which is really beautiful to see. I agree with what Navroop just said about the Shakti and Shiva. I myself am a big practitioner. I meditate every day, and I feel that really kind of balances. I mean, this whole, the motto House of Balance, to find balance is to honor both that we have inside, and we have the female and male energy. It's not about fighting or trying to oppress in one or the other. It's really about balancing it out. In some situations we need the male energy more, in others we need the female. So it's really kind of about finding the balance. For me, it's I do a daily ritual of tapping, a bit of qigong, meditation, and mantra chanting, and that really helps me to kind of just be, take on whatever comes in the day. And I think one of the, and I wouldn't say it's a feminine, we spoke a lot about feminine kind of leadership, what is it, Eigenschaften?
Properties.
Energies.
Characteristics during the corona, that women were better leaders, and because of the empathy. I think men have that in them as well, but they just had to be those strong men. And I think it's beautiful to see that now they are allowing themselves to be softer and more feminine as well, without losing kind of the masculine part as well. And that's why I'm really happy to see also Roy here on the panel talking about femininity. On that note, I'm going to pass it over to you.
For the Passover. Well, I think it's always interesting being a man. At least sometime we're getting it right. I'm a dyslexic polymath, so I have about 30 streams simultaneously, so I'm half woman already yet. I believe the soul's androgynous, so we have to find the balance between the feminine and the masculine. At CSPOC, we're focused on self-sustaining solutions, and we hosted a conference on Monday for women inspiring a peaceful and sustainable world. And there's me and 200 women, leaders from around the world, and I did mention the fact that I was there to listen, which is obviously a surprise for them. And what we discovered was that obviously both are equally valuable, but we're out of balance at the moment. That's the key. And I think the whole universe is about balance, which is interesting in the fact that we're in the house of balance. So between dark and light, you know, the shadow side, the light side, all are actually okay. You just have to be aware of them, acknowledge them, and then let them go so you don't become a prisoner of particular perceptions. I'm very conscious of the Vedic teaching, and if you go back, it's probably more than 6,000 years, but we're just beginning to understand that the physics in the Vedic scriptures is what we're talking about in terms of quantum physics now. So, you know, we're talking about a universe which is probably much older than we currently think, and their perception was, let's start by about 311 trillion years. And what the view was that we breathe in, we rest, and we breathe out, and then we rest and breathe in again and breathe out. So in a sense, that's like the masculine and feminine. You know, we receive, we hold it, and then we breathe out, and then we rest, and then we breathe in again. And that speaks to, you know, Qigong and a lot of the mystic traditions, which are all about letting go of our distractions and discovering who we are. Now, when it comes to the operation of a business or operation of an NGO, and we're part of an old family, so we've been around for a bit and linked with a lot of other old families around the world. And the families have always been able to step back from the immediacy of just making money. They've always had a tradition of care for the community and the people around them. And what I'm noticing is that it's actually the women who are incredibly powerful in families. If you go to some of the worst survival situations, like the cotton towns in the UK and so on, it was the women who actually anchored the community together. I was chair of the Rotarian Disaster Agency, and you find that the men usually disappear in a disaster. It's actually the women that hold the community together, and they're the survivors. So bringing that into the context of business, we've had a whole period of maybe a couple of hundred years, maybe more, of male-dominated management, which tended to mean it was about command and control, which is great if you have a set of rules that you can define. But in a world where everything is changing, you know, we have complex and natural disasters, and therefore you don't have a set of rules. And therefore you need this flexibility, which is very much around celebrating emotional and spiritual intelligence. Emotional intelligence in terms of relationships, and spiritual intelligence in terms of trust. And that's the thing that's missing in most places, is this lack of trust. And I was with the director of the United Nations in Geneva the other day, when she went off record and said she was a journalist. She said, the thing I noticed about here is everybody's in silos and nobody trusts each other, which creates a whole mechanism of dysfunctional behaviour. So I think celebrating women can naturally find a place, and by saying that, celebrating the feminine, I should say more specifically, because it's as true as for men as it is for women, is finding this place where you can be more agile. You know, recognising that you don't have all the answers, you have to work together to find solutions. Recognising that you have to trust each other. And a friend of mine is a guy called Art Hariba in Japan, and he had a whole motto. His motto for his business was joy and fun. Emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. One of his factories was destroyed by a tsunami, and the employees rebuilt it in 6 months, which is impossible. So we are rebuilding our own factories, our own communities, our own lives, and our own relationships all the time. And I suspect if you made it joy and fun, it might get a bit easier.
Beautiful. So what's interesting about some of the themes is that we started off with the reignition of the feminine, and now we're talking about joy and fun. And also, I think what's interesting is beforehand, you know, it was the shamanics and the touch with Mother Earth and et cetera, now it's being manifested or being rediscovered, and we're discovering now in terms of quantum physics. So we think that we're seeing something new, but actually it's just getting, I think, new layers of understanding and just different frameworks of seeing that something that has existed forever and ever, which is really exciting. So now let's take a look at some of these frameworks. So a lot of these frameworks that we have relied upon for centuries are starting to explode. And really, like, almost in our faces, and they're really showing in stark relief the fact that there is change happening, that there is a profound diversity of opinion on both sides, and that they seem to be breaking, but are they? And so I'm curious to hear from the panelists. As you look at what's taking place in the world today, how do you characterize what you're seeing? What are you focusing on today? And what is an insight that you have gained from one of them? What is an insight you've gained with regard to what you're seeing there? So I'll start with you again, and then we'll walk down.
Okay, it's very difficult to describe the world at the moment. It's just, you look at climate change and you see massive levels of disasters, and we see, when we talk to my colleagues in the UN, they say we're actually beyond the tipping point now. So it's actually disaster mitigation. We see this drive for money being almost destroying civilization. We see the need for families. I mean, I'm reminded of the Swiss constitution, which is a remarkable constitution. And at its root is the family, the commune. And interesting enough, in the families, women are celebrated as they're the masters of the home and are great change agents. And then the power gets less as you go to the commune and the canton, and the federal government, interestingly, is 7 leaders, balanced masculine and feminine normally, and they take it in turns to be president. So I believe very much in this movement to a council of elders, both in business and in communities. So I think where we are now is that because of the complexity and the nature of the complexity, we have to have a greater level of dialogue. We have to have a greater level of understanding. We need to talk to each other. We need to embrace each other in many ways. And that's where this is a new beginning, I think, where the typical masculine organisation is where the president locks himself in a room surrounded by PAs so that nobody can get at him or her. So we need to move away from this isolationism to recognise it's a whole process of sharing, empowering and enabling.
Let's start with Vera.
I agree on the collaboration. In fact, what we've been doing on the collaboration so far is we've been talking about certain, and being, women, but also other minorities without having them in the room. And I think what I see, the shift I see in the world happening is actually to bring those people, and I hope we're going to see much more than of that, to actually bring the people into the room whose lives we're discussing, right? And that happened before we had, men congregating around tables over dinner talking about life and, how it could potentially become better for women, if at all. But really, collaboration and talking is about not setting the parameters for those we're talking about. They need to be at the table. And that's what on my hand, also I'm really excited. I'm moderating a panel tomorrow, and there's a young indigenous woman from Ecuador fighting to preserve nature. And she's on the same panel with Deepak Chopra and Sadhguru. And of course, those two figures are really heavyweights, we know them, but the fact that this young woman, really bring this feminine energy, and they in fact managed to bring the whole Ecuadorian government to court and won the battle against the government, which is, I feel like we don't talk about it enough in the world. And I'm not saying they did it because the feminine energy, but it is just a female tribe in Ecuador fighting to make this happen. And I think this is so beautiful, and we need to bring more women, more people to the table to talk about that. And I do, to your question, what shift in the world, I do think I see a glimpse of that shift happening. And considering we have, those conversations here, and hopefully it will, expand further in the consciousness of the world. And I do think that this is something I'm really excited and optimistic to see. But I'm an optimist in general. I know there's a lot of disasters. I was at a dinner yesterday also, we spoke about that we actually passed the tipping point, indeed. But let's hope we can still do something about it. if we all collaborate. Radical collaboration, I think, is a key word.
Okay.
Yeah, wow. Profound insights. Again, I have a lot to say, and it's almost like starting and ending points are blurry, I think, in this conversation. But I'll share a few things. You know, there's many things happening simultaneously when you kind of look out in the world. There's forces that are opposing, and that's, again, very Vedic. By the way, I've not studied the Vedas, just as a disclaimer, so definitely don't take me as authority on it. Do your own study. But like I said, culturally, I'm aware of a bunch of that knowledge. But you know, to your point, Vera, I think you know, in my own self, in my inner self, I know the change and I feel the change. So I also like to believe there's change in the world, but we see these opposing forces too, like abortion laws in the US, right? And you know, I think our panel is on the what needs to happen, bring it down to the ground, right, when the rubber hits the road. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and that's really my call to action. One of the things that I will share is that it's not just, oh, it's nice to have, you know, 50% females or whatever in the room. We actually did a bunch of empirical work at MIT. I'm a fellow at MIT Connection Science at the Media Lab. And if you look at group intelligence, different from individual intelligence, the different metrics that we measure, we look at innovation and success of a team. Here's the thing. The fastest way and the best way and the easiest way to have the highest group intelligence is to have at least 50% women. We measured it, right? And so this is not, you may believe a group is a collection of individuals, so you like aggregate and total it, but that's not how it works. It's a multiplier effect. It's a catalyst. You remember your chemical equations back in middle school. That's how it works, right? And so I think we also just kind of need to move away from linear thinking, which is a huge problem in the world. When you look at aggregating parts and pieces. And again, that probably works for like command and control, that sort of stuff. And you know, when we were young, we would like study these military models, and I used to play chess at the state level, whatever. But you know, my life changed. Another point of change was when I studied about complex systems, complexity science, networks theory, right? And when you look at non-linear dynamics, non-linear systems, so I think it's important to recognize that our social, economic, biological systems are complex systems. That means they're interdependent parts, they're individual parts, but they affect the other pieces or sections within the network. Now what happens is what we call an emergent phenomenon. Emergence is a property of a complex system, which means it's hard to predict what would happen at the system level if you only look at the individual parts, right? An example of that is, think of like a flock of birds flying together. No one bird knows, all right, we're gonna make this exact triangle, it's gotta have this 40-degree angle here, 60-degree on the other side. So they're only looking at the neighbors. And what you see when you observe the system as a whole, and this is where complexity comes from, is our biological world, is you see these beautiful patterns, right, and that they make, and the really optimal structures that they fly together into, and also taking turns in sort of the leadership in the group. And so that is really the way our economic systems work as well. Another example is markets, demand and supply. You see how panic spreads. So we're currently in a little bit of a downturn, so it's a great time to study complex systems too. And again, I read about it. It kind of was life-changing. I gave a TED Talk on it when I was in Italy. And then a couple of years later, I was like, oh shit, that's what they were saying in the Vedas too. So it's interesting for me. This continues to be sort of that journey. And I think, humans have been on the planet for a lot longer than we usually think about on an everyday basis. So there's a lot of intelligence that's around you, that's inside you from an evolutionary perspective. That's another species, again, very important. We lost 25% of our biodiversity, and that is actually the biggest sign on how bad climate change is and how that's affecting us. And you know, life, to treat life as a precious thing in itself, rather than every other form of life on the planet serving humans. Again, this hierarchical sort of like, you know, the man on the top and then the humans, and then there's like sort of the pyramid situation. So we, like, I didn't grow up in that, you know, like when I was growing up, they say you have to do good things, you have to do good deeds and good karma, because if you don't, then you're born in a difficult life. So it's considered that human life, because we have so much agency, is one of the top ones, that you live through many lives. And again, like, don't quote me on this, because like I'm not, you know, I'm just simply sharing another perspective of looking at life and looking at the world. And the fact that human life, you gain it by living many other lives, the harder lives, if you may. And so you have to do good with it, right? And so there is this sense of protection. You can think of that as a masculine energy. You have to take care of every other species and life on the planet. So a chicken's life is invaluable, because that's the only life that chicken has. It's not measured as the amount of meat it puts on the plate.
So let's, if we may, let's, one, I know, Royce, you have a comment you'd like to make, but I also want to bring in the next thing. So our panel is all about the what you want to see manifested. So right now, right here today, what do you want to see manifested? Roy?
Taking from your point around complexity science.
And, I'm sorry, I want to add another thing. And how do you see feminine energy adding to that? And just some, I want to bring in the audience, so just some faster answers, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay, what I was about to say, what we know from complexity science is if you're on the edge of chaos, it's the intangibles which have the most effect, which is people. And I think we have to change the paradigm where we recognize people, we believe in joy and fun. We've in our civilization, I think the weapon of mass destruction is the lack of kindness. So if you just start introducing kindness in our lives, and often that comes from the feminine and the caring and the transgenerational view. I think a woman always thinks about a family, so the commitment is at least 24 years, whereas men tend to have shorter time scales. They tend to be tactical, women tend to be strategic. So let me pass over.
Sure. Can I get the question one more time?
Sure. What do you want to see in the world?
Yeah, I would. Okay, a few things. First of all, we need to eat a lot less meat, and just a very basic number thing. 40% of climate change is directly impacted by the meat industry, and so if we really want to, find a solution to that, that's going to require majority of the population to either be vegetarian, vegan, or just all of us to consume massively less amounts of meat. So that's the first thing. Second, women to own a lot more assets and resources, and I'm not just talking about access. I'm talking about control in a good way, because then you are the agent, and then you can direct those resources to a better world and a more balanced world, if you may. And again, that responds to sort of, what is the role of the feminine here? And it's going to start with men saying, okay, we need more females, and so stop fighting that. That's what we need to see. Stop fighting that. If you're grown up, your job is to make the way for those who are not there, right? If you're the gatekeeper, your job is to open the door and keep it open until the room's filled with the correct people and the right set of people. And so if you're not there yet, there's a problem, right? So for me, it's really sort of like engaging with those men and women who I met a couple of needs a little bit more evolution in my view, but yeah, to get to that point, and I think again dialogue is important there. But we're not here just chit chatting. We run companies, we run operations, we do strategy, and so like it's not like, oh, we're doing you a favor. So that attitude. I had one conversation, it was condescending, and I almost threw the card back on his face, but then I was like, I'm a polite person. So
in the trash can.
Yeah.
Oh, there are so many things. I mean, we talk so much about the metaverse and Web3, but I feel like if we don't take care of nature, there is no metaverse really. I mean, we, the humans, are the most important technology, so to speak, for the future. There's no future without us, and there's no us without nature. And that's why, I mean, I love Sadhguru's campaign right now, the Save Soil, what he does, because I think he says if we don't take care of that in the next 15 years, for the next 200 years, we'll have a food crisis. I mean, this has to be like, let that sink in. It's insane. Like, we don't have so much time left. But to bring it back to the female, I'm working on building a network, a community for women who are actually, you know, high-achieving women who have gone almost to the top, but still have, you know, this glass ceiling to break. But those are the women who've been giving and inspiring and mentoring, didn't have so many role models themselves, but been giving a lot. And I've been speaking to a lot of those women, and they many times are burnt out, they don't have a community, then many times don't have a family. And I want to build like a safe space for them where they are inspired again. And I feel like we need that kind of push, because, I mean, there are still not enough women, you know, at the table, you know, not enough board members. So I really want to support women to get higher, and then opening those doors to the next generation. I feel this generation already is helping a lot the younger generation, but they have not received so much help, and I really want to kind of give this last push and have a space where they feel inspired again. Kind of like a YPO and Hoffman meets together and creates this safe space for women.
Exciting. Do you want to answer the question yourself? Like, what do you want to see?
He started. We did the whole,
Oh,
all three of us.
I wasn't sure that you actually commented on that though.
I think the main thing is that we
Maybe.
need to celebrate the feminine.
Okay.
That's the key. Now that has different forms. I think men get paralysed by helplessness because they don't really want to let go of the power. Women sometimes get paralysed because there was the glass ceiling, and then we have the sticky floor, which is them not believing that they have the competence or being overcompetent before they apply. And I think if we can just move away from those spaces, I mean, it's different from different countries, different cultures, but I think we just have to start getting to this place of enablement. And I think enablement is where women and men can play a part in moving to a better world, where hopefully we can end up where we don't destroy ourselves, which is a bit on the cards at the moment. But let's hope we can actually live the next few years, maybe not be the chicken on the plate, but be
Reggie for the patients.
Reggie Patties.
okay.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. And so, you know, I think it's interesting to just also note that how the different ways of manifestation and how we can each sort of seeps into our being in terms of being the feminine energy and bringing it into leadership. And so I want to take it now to the audience to see if any of you have any questions or comments that you would like to offer to the panel, and then, or otherwise I will continue with another question. How do you all see the feminine? Do you all see the feminine living in your lives? Please.
I'm happy to add something to that, because I just think that we need a shift of system. So going to the circular system versus the linear system. And to me, the circular system actually stands for feminine. It includes everything that is very deep inside of us, that we have not been taught, that we have not been raised on, because we all have been raised on a linear system. So it took a while for me as a woman to realize that there is another system which actually runs that planet. You know, the circular system is nature, it's us, it's everywhere. So if we just start to focus on a circular system, you will need the best people to do that, the ones that are closest to that. You will start to hire women to do it, because it's stronger in us than it is in a male concept. So just if you want to make a shift the system, and you automatically add the female, because you have to.
Very interesting. So how are circular systems showing up in your lives? And might the multiverse that we're thinking about, is that possibly a circular system or a multiversion system, a certainly non-linear system? What do you think of some of these futures that we're talking about today?
Thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a realization, it's uncovering the truth and seeing past the sort of the brainwashing of patriarchy and I grew up personally in a very relatively strict society and, you know, conservative family. But it's interesting because you just need a spark, you know? You don't need the whole thing catered to you. And you're right, I think we're doing a lot for the generation that would follow us of leaders, folks who are in their 20s, maybe are teenagers. And everything is circles and cycles, and you know, I mean, if you look at sort of the, if I may, using this with caution, Western conception of growth and development as an individual, you know, you go to the best schools, you try to get the best career, then you have a family, then you start collecting assets and wealth and prestige and sort of, and then one day you're dead. Okay. But this is not. There's more to life, right? There are cycles to celebrate, and you know, there's this Chinese proverb that says the sign of a wisdom is when you plant a tree that whose shade you would not sit under, right? And so we kind of get it, but that circularity is in your life too, is in your own life cycles, right? So maybe you had I don't know, like corporate America is, for example, pretty traumatizing. So, you know, if you complete that cycle, there are a few more cycles needed to kind of undo that and kind of, you know, kind of discover, I guess, your own creativity and talent as well. But, you know, honestly, that book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, has so much wisdom, so many answers, and, you know, my mother's reading it, and she's been crying reading it too, and I did as well. And so many folks I recommended it to, and really that talks about the cycles in life, cycles of creativity, cycles of you know, different phases of life. So, for example, women are constantly surprised when they are tired, right? We don't take care of ourselves. It's like this always on sort of situation, but that's not how life works. If you look at like you know, athletes who are, you know, are in the Olympics, there are phases of intense activity, training, and then the cycles of rest.
Wonderful.
And so, yeah. So anyway, more examples, but
Thank you.
May I
Please.
comment on this?
Yes, please.
I totally agree, and I think we have a chance with the circular and versus linear, and I think we have the chance to do something now with the whole new world, so to speak, we're building with the Web3 and the metaverse, which is more inclusive to women. Women managed to raise more money in the crypto space than a traditional VC, because first it started with being anonymous, but now they are actually coming out, so to speak. We show we are women. So first, because it was anonymous, but second, and more importantly, because women are in early, we're in at the same time. In the traditional tech, we didn't really have a chance to get in at the same time with men and at the same level. Whereas here for the Web3 and Metaverse, we are actually on time, and we are building this together. I think really important is to know who's building it. I mean, it's a whole other panel, but I think if we bring everybody to the table, like I was saying in the beginning, we can actually build something really inclusive and collaborative and maybe really changing. And I think it's really up to us, you know, and humanity one day will look back and say, we were building this new system. So how did we do it? And I think now is the chance for us to really build it well, and that means building it in different and like in a circular way of thinking, bring everyone to the table, not just women, but all different minorities, and knowing who is building it. You know, it can't be some anonymous guys sitting in the basement building it. We have to know who it is, and then we might have a chance to bring much more of the feminine characteristics into that.
Yeah, maybe transparency is another aspect of femininity.
and trust.
I think
Trust, yeah.
I'm conscious that everything is resonance, you know, not just, you know, what we see as human beings or animals, plants, stones. Everything is a resonance of creation, and respecting that resonance, that acceptance, is a really important aspect of listening to our children calling from the future and creating a better field now. I think I can see that what we've done a lot of work where you put three people together in this role of the storyteller, listener and observer, which dissipates about 80% of fear. And then if women actually did that and created more collaborative groups, I think that might be the way to create a much more powerful movement, where you can fight against individual disruptive thoughts, you can actually create something where it's a sort of sisterhood, if you like, and I think that's part of this process we're in at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
That's why I'm building this network, because men have had them all along, right? So it's really,
Sure.
but it's not just fight. I feel like we should not think in terms of fighting, right? We should think in terms of really working together, collaborating. I still feel I want to build that network because we still need spaces where we really support each other, bring more women, on boards and higher leadership positions. But really it's about working together in the end. We talked in the beginning about balancing the female and male, and that's what we have to do in real life as well. We need to, I'm happy to see that so many men in this room for that topic, right? So the men in this room are aware and conscious already. It's just about kind of spreading it to others.
Yeah, and that's which you resist persists, right? We all know that because you're fighting against it, so you're creating it. Every time you're fighting it, you're creating it. So a completely different paradigm of thought. So I'm going to bring it home. I'm actually, because we need to close.
Yeah,
so
one last comment actually, if that's
short.
Okay. Yeah, very short. Tiny intervention. I think it's important though because I've been rallying for this, I guess, all my life. But when it comes to gender. And gender empowerment and females and networks of females. I think it's a male issue that men have to take the responsibility for this. It's not a female issue. Or you talk in your circles and create groups and then it becomes a negotiation with the men who control power. I don't buy into that paradigm, right? Men have to own this as a much bigger issue, even more than women, because for us, women are just entering a lot of these spaces that men have been holding for the longest time, right? And so putting it on the women is not fair, right? It's like saying, oh, we colonized you, by the way, it was your fault. So it's a little bit of that sort of broken mentality. So I'll pause there, and that was kind of what to say.
All right. So final questions. We're going to do the final question. I'm going to ask for an answer in a couple of words, a phrase, or one sentence. That's it. So what sets your hearts afire with optimism today? And Roy, we're going to start with you.
The possibility of finding a self-sustaining solution.
Great. Thank you.
It involves everybody.
Honestly, for me, just my breath is enough, and just being alive and just taking it all in. There's so many problems in the world to solve, but I have peace inside me, so
Wonderful.
that's good for me.
Very similar for me as well. It's really spirituality helps me keep balance and keep going. Many things set my heart on fire, but I think more than anything is really that we're coming together to discuss topics like that, and we have to do it on a collective. But on an individual basis, everyone has really to take care of themselves. I think well-being has to become much, much more important for everyone. Really, I can only encourage everyone to just take a few minutes to breathe and meditate every day.
Wonderful. So with that, before we actually clap, I'm going to ask us to take a pause, take a moment, take it in, everything you've been hearing, feeling, just for a moment. Reach deep inside. All right, and now let us share our thanks for this panel and the wonderful sharing that they gave to us.